Hi everyone, and welcome to the real-time coloring version of this card. If you want to see the card making part, there is a link in the description down below, up in the right corner, or at the end of this video. But let's jump into the coloring. The character I'm coloring today is called Violet's Red Rose, and she is a super cute character from makeitcrafty.com, a digital stamp, so you can just download her and print her and start working with her today if you enjoy her. She is designed by the designer Krista, which is the designer behind Saturated Canary. So if you are one of those who are missing her gorgeous, cute, adorable stamps, you can now get some from Make It Crafty. So I actually colored this image because Zoe wanted us from the DT to help her color up these images for the store. This is one of the things. There's so many good things about being on a design team, but that is one of them. I just think is super cool, that my coloring is going to represent this image on the store. I remember the first time I got that opportunity. She had a whimsical dragons and unicorns that she was releasing, and I made a coloring of a dragon, and that is still the image for the packaging of the rubber stamp version of that stamp, which I think is super cool. Yeah, I think it's super cool. But yeah, I am coloring her with Copics, and as this was one of the images that were going up in the store, I decided that I wanted to go comfort zone with the skin color. So I have this skin color combination that I love working with, which is E50. I think I use E50 here, or E000, either of them. Depending on if I want her to look a little bit rosy or I want to look her a little bit more tanned. Rosy for the E000 and E50 for the kind of more tanned look, but still looking very pale. And then E00, E21, E11 and E04. So I started out with the lightest color and I blocked kind of the shadows out. Then went in with the darkest color, and I'm just adding shadows in like corners and her eyelids, around her eyes. I added shadows underneath her throat and a little bit on her arm. Then I went in with the E11 and just kind of extended those shadows wherever I wanted them or needed them to be extended. One of the techniques that I'm using when I'm coloring skin, which is very important to get the blend I want and the light I want, is that I always use the E11 to completely cover the E04. The E04 is a very, very strong color. It's a very, very dark color, and if you leave it not coloring over it with the E11, it feels a little bit too red, a little bit too shadowy, or at least for the combination that I am after. If you are after for a more contrasty look, it's nothing wrong with it. You should color the way that you like. I know that there are a lot of people who doesn't like my super detailed way of coloring. They rather have very little shading, just making the face kind of rounded. But I love kind of giving the characters a lot of expression and facial expression. A couple of things that I was thinking about when I did this ways was also that I wanted to give her a bridge of her nose, and I didn't go in either with the E04 or the E11 for the bridge of the nose. I started my shadowing on the bridge of the nose with the E21, and the reason for doing that is because I didn't want to have that stark contrast. I just wanted it to look a little bit rounded. The deeper contrast you make, the more dimension you will get. And therefore, by choosing to use only the E21 for the shadowing of the bridge of her nose, and then blending that out with the E00 and then with the E50, it's much softer, and it doesn't look like it's bending in as much as the other parts that I have shadowed. So basically I was playing, kind of figuring out how I wanted her face to look. I've been working towards getting a more natural look to the faces of the characters that I'm coloring, but still there are stamps that I try to not add too much dimension and too much details with, because they're drawn in such a way that they look better if you make it a little bit more simpler. But these characters that Krista have designed, they are awesome to actually give that dimension and build up that dimension. The last part that I'm doing for her face is I'm adding a little bit of pink on her nose, on her lips, and on her cheeks. I have been watching a lot of art videos, and this is a thing that I haven't thought about, and that is that you have certain areas in your face that are a little bit pink. And I actually have for years, when I add rouge to my face, I add it on my cheeks, but also after I add it to my cheeks, I add teeny tiny the rest I had in my brush on my nose, on my cheek, and on my forehead, just between my eyes, because that if I had powder in my face, doing that kind of brings back the life to the face. So I kind of experimenting with adding those rose things into the faces of the characters to see if I can get a little bit more life in them. So yeah. So I went in with the B63 on her eye whites to give them dimension, just a little bit of a line underneath her eyelash line, so that it looks like the eyelashes is shadowing the whites of her eyes. And then I had a couple of different browns to give her brown eyes, because I don't know why. I have blue eyes myself, but I think brown eyes are just beautiful. It's so much depth in brown eyes. So I do experiment with different brown shades, and these were the ones that I was choosing today. And by the way, I do have the full list of pens that I've used, or the Copics I've used, in the description down below. So if you don't want to kind of pause and write off all the numbers, they are in the description. They're always in the description. I will also leave all the materials I used for the full card in the description, together with a link to my blog. And I've been working on getting better blog posts, more information, a little bit more text, a little bit more images. I'm trying to up my game in card blogging, and I hope you enjoy them. I actually have a lot of fun making both the videos and the blog posts. I sat down and I wondered what color I wanted to use on the rest of her, and I just couldn't decide. So I decided, well, I'm gonna go to color the greenery, the rose and the flowers instead, to see if that kind of pops something for me. And I wanted to have a little bit more of a peachier pink, but still be in a very pink area. If you would go for the R12, for example, you would get a much more orangey pink, so a redder pink, or towards the orange spectrum. The same with the 20. but the 35 is more, it's coral basically, just as the 35 says here. The R's are more coral, and that is kind of what I was after here. So I color the rose. The idea of coloring the rose is to kind of make it darker where the petals overlap, and then give them some highlights where the light could kind of hit. And I'm imagining that my light source is in the upper left corner. I don't know really why I've chose that, because she's facing straight on, so you have an opportunity to do it either, but I think it's because the rose was on her left side and she has her belly kind of towards the left side, so it's keeping her open, so kind of more inviting by having the light hit her towards the front of her body than having it hit her from the back. You could also have the light hit her from the middle and kind of build up the shadows on each side, but I don't know, I like having a side light, sort of. It makes it easier for me to add the lights for it. But after I'd done the rose, I kind of decided, okay, I'm gonna take the pink from the rose and I'm gonna bring it in to the rest of the clothing. One of the things that I really love with these images that Krista have designed is that they have all of these layers. There are so many layers, and it's kind of an adventure figuring out where to put all the colors and where I want everything to go. I can say the first time I got one of these images, I was super scared. It's a couple of years now since that, but I was super scared. Layered clothing images, picking colors, even though I love colors and I love working with colors, picking colors was very hard for me in the beginning, until I figured out that I could just try to match pattern papers, because there you had a color combination that worked. And my favorite, I had a few favorite different companies that I just completely loved. My Mind's Eye did a lot of kind of vintage looking papers for a while, and I have a bunch of cards and videos from 2013, 2014 that are utilizing those papers and kind of making combinations with those colors. Other brands that do this really good is like Doodlebug Designs. They do super cute and simple designs, and therefore they have very simple but very good and colorful color combinations in their papers. And I had loads of fun, or I still have loads of fun kind of combination with papers. I haven't used that much pattern papers in a while. Mostly been working with mediums like distress inks and such to make my own, but I have a couple of pattern papers coming in the next couple of days, I think. Last time I saw that the package was in Denmark, so and that was a couple of days ago, so I'm hoping that they will arrive soon. But I think the package might have gotten stuck in customs, so but I'm waiting. I'm hoping for it to arrive soon. But yeah, I continued on. Kind of again, I got a little bit, where do I put which colors? So well, we're gonna work with the leaves instead. So I picked out a couple of yellow greens to do the greens. I think I also have the G9, which is a green, for the darkest colors. And that's a tip if you want to. It's the G07, not the G09. But anyhow, if you want to have depth in greenery, you can use the yellow greens for the lighter colors and then go in with a green, which is a more bluish tone, as the darker color. because that will naturally, shadows are naturally kind of bluish, so therefore that will kind of give a whole other depth than if you just would take a dark color in the same yellow greens. So if I would have continued with the YG O's like 05, 07, 09, I do get a beautiful blend, but I might not get the same kind of depth in the image. I usually have the standard of going a YG 05 or a YG 03, then a YG 17, because that will be a little bit more towards a grayer tone, then a YG 67, again even more towards the grayer, and then the darkest usually is a G28 or 29. So that is my standard greens, but this I wanted it to be a little bit lighter, a little bit more yellowish and brighter. Yeah, brighter in the tones. So I'm continuing on with my N colors, which I don't know, right now the N grays are my go-to grays. I have different go-to grays depending on which paper I'm using, depending on which light there is outside, what color I'm gonna combine with them. But right now I kind of drawn to the N grays. They have, I don't know, they have a very, it's a cold gray, but it's not as cold as a cool gray, sort of. Yeah, I probably don't have any knowledge of what I'm talking about. I'm just winging it, you know, winging it. I will be drinking coffee throughout this voiceover because it's not even 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm doing this voiceover because I was inspired and this film was rendering overnight. But yeah, I decided to go with a full pink skirt as the bottom part. The stripes from the top doesn't go through to the bottom. So I kind of, yeah, but red, I like the red, I want to bring it in. I kind of look like the little border part that is stripy in the bottom. I kind of thought it looked more like it was like the end of a shirt or something like that. So I'm just coloring over with red. Thinking about how I put the folds. Basically shadowing, thinking about where my light source is and giving shadows away from the light source but also behind the folds, so that it looks like the things that are actually the deeper folds, they are darker because they will be not get hit by the light as much because they are deeper. And by placing the shadows this way, you will get motion in the skirt. And if you want to learn more about how to add folds, I'm not an expert on it. I wing it, which I do with a lot of my coloring. But a lot of the knowledge that I do practice when I do this is I have gotten from the folds tutorial, which is an ebook on makeitcrafty.com. So if you want to know more how to make folds, I do recommend that book. It's super good. It's a very informative, so you get, it's not just an image that you learn how to draw, even though you get that information in it too, but you also get a whole bunch of tips on why the folds looks like they are. So basically you get a full tutorial about how to make folds, and then you get a couple of exercises to practice on a bunch of stamps, and those stamps comes with the ebook. It's really affordable, like it's almost the same price as the stamps that you get with the ebook. So yeah, go and look into that. I will put a link in the description down below, so you can do that. So his tutorials are awesome. But yeah, I did kind of squigglies on her skirt underneath. I always have a hard time trying to figure out how to shade a squiggly shirt like that. So what I do is I do a little bit of a squiggly with my darkest pen, and then I do squiggles on top with my next to darkest pen, and then I do squiggles or I fill it in with my lightest. That's how that's my kind of technique of doing those kind of underskirts. I then decided to continue going with the same gray on the top of her. You can use a lot of different colors, but I have found that I enjoy having a limited color palette when I color. Not only will it sort of help with staying with colors that actually match with themselves or match with each other, but also it kind of is a little bit more soothing for the eye. In this case, your eye, because of the softer colors in her skirt and in her body or around her, your face is really drawn to, or your eyes are really drawn to her face. That was what I was going to say. And I kind of like that. I kind of like that you are like pulled into her face and those stunning eyes. I am coloring red on her kind of top of her shoes here, and I have a couple of tips and tricks and things to say about it, because I don't know if you have noticed it, but the color combination I'm using for the pinks or reds doesn't blend perfectly. The R30, R32 and R35 are a little bit too separate, but I wanted to keep them in that family because I wanted to keep that color. And when I was working with the smaller pieces and the skirts folds and everything, the blending is much easier. But when you try to blend the R30 with the R32, because it is the R30 that is the problem, it is a little bit lighter than I would like it to be. You will see here that it don't really blend with the R32 at the top of her leg. I talked about this in one of the quick videos that I've been putting up for the 30-day challenge. I'm doing coloring videos every day for 30 days for very small images, but in one of them I talked about it, that a combination that works for smaller areas might not work for bigger areas, because the reason why we feel it is blending in the smaller areas is because the blend will be in the overlapping, and you will have a couple of millimeters between the colors where you have a natural overlapping occurring. But when it comes further that you need to blend them and have bigger areas to blend, that overlap won't be as, it will be harder to get. And there are different ways to get that overlap to work better. One is to layer the colors in multiple layers, where you start with, if we say in percentage is much easier, like 10% of the darkest color, and then maybe have the mid color being at 20%, and then the lightest color the rest. And then you take the second layer and you do like 15% of the darkest color, and then 30% of the mid color, and then the lightest color, because then you will have areas where the colors overlap with each other, and the layers will overlap with each other, making that you will have a more variegation, sort of. Or you can do as I did here, where I actually did the tip to tip technique, where I'm picking up the 32 with the 30 pen and putting down that ink, because you can pick up a little bit of ink on the 30 pen. When you're done, if you have any kind of ink left on your 30 pen, you can just scribble it on a side paper and it won't be there. It won't destroy your nibs, it won't hurt your pens to do that technique, but you can get a smoother blend by using it. So that was my tip on getting blends when it's a little bit complicated to get them. Now almost all of her is finished and I'm going to the hair. And this was actually, I kept the hair there because I didn't know what to do with it. I just didn't know. And then I remembered that I had been playing around with the brown 70s for different skin colors, and I kind of I like that soft, almost pinkish tone that the 70s have. So I decided that I am going to use the E70s for her hair. And this time I'm just winging it, very thoroughly winging it. I went in with started with the E74, and wherever the different hair strands kind of meet, and wherever the hairs are longer back than others, I used the 74, and I went straight in with the 74. No blocking in shades here, just straight in. So just trying to add depth in the hair. I'm doing flicking motions. This is one of those hairs where flicking motions is a very good way of doing the hair. I'm just adding like extra strands, and you can kind of do different widths of these flicks by having more or less pressure on your pen. When I do most of my flicks, I do them very, very thin. I hardly even let the pen be on the paper, so I have a very, very light hand. And the only way to learn that is to practice and practice and practice. I know that Zoe actually sits when she kind of talks in the phone with people, watch videos and stuff, and do flicks on papers to kind of practice. I don't have that patience, so I do my flicks on my characters and learn by doing. And I do color a lot, so I do get that in. I then went in with the 71 to kind of flick in hair, making those flicks longer, trying to bridge some places. And then I'm going to fill in all of the hair with the E70. So I don't want any whites. This is a personal preference, and it's very different from person to person, and everyone have their own techniques, and as long as you like how you do things, it's not wrong to do them that way. I always try new things all the time, even though I have my comfort places, because I want to see if I like things better and the other ways, so I do that a lot. But there's a few things that I like better. When I started out, one of the bigger things was that you were supposed to leave white for the super highlights to get that shine. It was kind of the way to do it. This is back 2012, 2013, somewhere around there. But since then, I personally feel that sometimes that can make the hair look unfinished in ways, especially when you're flicking. It's like you didn't take the time. But that's a personal thing. That's how I like to do things. If you enjoy having the whites, the white of the paper still there, keep them. I do have the whites of the papers when I do platinum blonde hair. then I use the lighter tones of the E40s. I think the E40, E41 and E42 is usually the ones I use, and then I leave white places, because then the hair will look much lighter than if I would have covered it with E40. So for the hair, I'm actually going in with the second layer, and I usually do that with hair because I wanted to build up a depth, and the easiest way to do that is to layer. I love layering. The Copics are not opaque, they are translucent. The darker color you use, the more pigment you have and the more opaque they do become, but they are always a little bit translucent. So by adding different layers, you can kind of build up that color and really get it layered and beautiful. But you need a good paper for that. If you are doing a lot of layers on a paper that isn't super dense, you will have problem with bleeding, because the pigment will spread across, not just down in the paper but also across in the paper. This is the Make It Colorful blending cardstock, which is a very dense cardstock, so you can do a lot of layering on top of it. For the last layer of my hair, I'm using the R32s. I'm going in with pinks. I felt that I really loved the pink undertone that the 70 had, but I really wanted to kind of push that pink, to get that pink a little bit longer, and to get the hair to more match with the rest of the character, with all her pinks in her clothing. So I took the R30 and the R32 and I flicked in some pink, and I kind of really love the outcome. You should try things like this. It is a lot of fun to kind of just layer colors that you just didn't think you could layer, and hair is a wonderful place to do that, because blending different color families like pink, reds and browns can be harder. So if you're doing a flicking hair technique, they kind of mix themselves a whole other way. So if you do enjoy playing around with mixing from different color families but are afraid of the blending, try doing it in the hair. I like adding strange color to hair, but this, yeah, I really enjoyed this one combination. So now I'm gonna do something that I haven't done in a long time, and that is I'm gonna do a background. I have periods when I do a whole bunch of different backgrounds and coloring backgrounds and having a lot of fun with it, but most of the times I kind of enjoy just coloring the character, cut it out and do a more abstract version on with blending or smooching or something like that. But I have been watching this artist called Karini Haley. She's art by Karini Haley on Twitter, Instagram and YouTube, and I've been watching her for years, and she does fan art. But what she does, which I really love, is that she does these illustrative backgrounds. I could compare them to both Pokemon. If you watch like Pokemon series, these kind of backgrounds. Totoro, my neighbor Totoro, has beautiful backgrounds that have this idea that you don't outline it with like a black pen or anything, you just color it in with your Copics, and she does beautiful these kind of backgrounds. And I've been wanting to try them on, and I have done in the past, tried doing stuff, but I haven't been haven't tested things out properly, and then things haven't looked the way I wanted, and I just felt a little bit cringy. I have cards that I'm a little bit cringy about when it comes to what I did with the backgrounds. I do have cards that I love too, but I keep them all out there for you anyhow. But I wanted to do this kind of bush. So a few things that I did before actually putting ink to the paper, because I really loved how she looked, and I didn't want to destroy the image because then I would have to do it all again. So I went in and I took I have a sheet of this kind of cardstock that I cut down into smaller cards, which I used to stamp on. But I took these and I sat down, I googled bushes, and then I added cartoon to it. And illustration is also a very good thing to add to it. And I got a whole bunch of images, and I could kind of figure out how they had done it. Many of the images works with, like in Illustrator. And in Illustrator you can layer things. So you start with your dark leaves at layer, backer layer, and then you can add mid-tone leaves at the top layer, and I've been playing around a lot in Photoshop, and then you also work with layers. With Copics, you can't layer in that way just because the pens aren't opaque, because they are translucent. You have to think the opposite way around, which can be a little bit complex. But after trying this out, I think I did 4 or 5 different versions on a side paper. I went to the image, I felt, now I have done this, now I can try it. And there were a few things. I wanted to bring the flowers that was at the bottom of her feet into the bush, so that they kind of translated and moved in, and the bush would be more connected to the rest of the image. So I started off by blocking it out with the lightest pink. I did this both because if I wanted, I actually could color over it. If I added enough layers, you wouldn't really see if I colored over a flower or two. But also I really wanted to make sure that I had the spacing of these little flowers. The second part that I've been doing while I've been talking here is that I have colored the leaves, the first kind of layer of light leaves, and those were kind of giving the outline. I wanted it to be leafy, so that it wasn't a round bush, it had those kind of where the leaves were pointing out. I also wanted to make sure that they fit the whole image, and I also chose to make the leaves in a size that matched the leaves at the bottom of the image. So those were the kind of things I was thinking about when I added these leaves. I didn't want to have too small leaves, because both I would have to sit and do small leaves all day, but also that would make it look like it was further away than it was, and I really wanted it to look like it's just behind her. That's why it's the size it is. It's like she's standing at a hedge or something like that. So I added all of those leaves, got the kind of shape I wanted. I can say the last trial picture I did for this kind of bush, I took a pen and kind of made an outline that sort of looked like the outline of the character, and then I colored around it to kind of figure out how I would put everything. But the end result doesn't look as that image. It's just the feeling of it that I wanted to make sure that I got. Well, I'm warming up my voice for the day anyhow. It's a long video. It's 56 minutes long. I think I worked about 1.5 hours 2 hours on this image. I removing all of the pen changes. I'm removing all of the when I'm sitting and thinking about what color am I supposed to do now, stuff like that isn't on this video, and therefore the video is much shorter than it actually takes to color this image. But I had a lot of fun, so I don't mind coloring for 2 hours. But the 30-day coloring challenge, I'm doing the images, very small images, so that I can color them in like 10 to 15 minutes, because I would go crazy if I would do a 2-hour coloring every day. I do that. I really do that. I do color that much, but I have videos that I want to make. I have cards I want to make, so I don't want all my time to go up into making the 30-day challenge. But anyhow, the second layer I'm doing with the color is that I'm going in with the darkest color, and I'm coloring around some of the leaves at the bottom, or in this case actually started with the darker tone, and I didn't color around the leaves. I just added kind of a bottom part, and then I kind of but I want to go in with the mid-tones also, so that I know which leaves I'm supposed to color and not color. So then I went in with that, and as you see, as I go, I kind of I'm closing the edge, the outer edge of the bush, and then I'm adding these kind of outlier leaves that doesn't look they are sitting together with the bush, and that is also kind of an illustrative way of making the bush looks more leafy without adding like branches and stuff like that. I wanted to keep it very, very simple, because the more details I would add to the background, the flatter the image would feel, the less depth. If you look at a photo of a mountain range, for example, if you look at a photo of a mountain range, you will see that the mountains at the furthest back will be kind of grayish, and you won't see any detail, and the closer to you they get, the more detail you will see. When you're working with illustrations, you kind of enhance that, because what we see on that photo, or if we were looking on a mountain range ourselves, you can't really translate the amount of details to an illustration, because you want to kind of get a focal point, and then you want to add the details behind to give it a sense of depth. So what you do when you do an illustration is that you kind of bring that not in focus part much closer than it would be in reality. So as I'm doing here with the bush, I'm not going in and doing black outlines on every leaf. I'm not adding every little leaf to my bush either. I'm letting kind of the outer line of the bush look like it's leaves, but connected, so they're not separated. They're just a sea of color in that color with the outline of the leaves, which gives you the impression that you have loads and loads of leaves, but in reality it's just one base color. And that will help you to give an illusion of a bush without it overtaking the character. I want the bush to be there, but I want the character to be the focal image. That is how I make cards. That is how I do my coloring. I try to figure out what image or detail that I want to be the focal part, the part that your eye will catch first. And then I figure out what's the next area I want your eye to go to. And I make that kind of in a medium attention by maybe not adding black lines, or adding a line from the focal image to that image. So that is what you can do when you're using like sequins and crystals and stuff on your card. You might have, say, a sentiment that is very, very strong, or a coloring of a little character that is very, very strong, and then you want the eyes to travel to the sentiment. Then you can add kind of a sprinkling of your little diamonds or sequins or whatever towards the sentiment, and then your eye will naturally, when you see the image, it will draw to if the coloring have the strong colors and is the thing that actually pops on the card, your eye will automatically drawn to that, and then the sequence will help you to move your eye towards the sentiment. A lot of these things are done kind of by feel. It's not that I'm sitting, okay, I'm putting the image here, so now I want to put the sequence here to make you look towards. I usually don't think that way. It's how it works, but I usually don't think that way directly. I'm just doing how I feel. Like, okay, now I see this. Now I kind of, how do I get you to see the sentiment? Do I need to make it strong, or I wing it. Most of the time I wing it. After making a lot of cards, you kind of get that feeling. You're kind of figuring out how to do these things. So yeah, that was a very long discussion, but it's a long video, so then I can talk a lot about strange kind of ideas and how to color things. Anyhow, I have started to continue with my bush here. I went over to go with the YG05. When I'm working with a background like this, I do jump between the different colors because I get stuck. This time I really did get stuck. I'm like, I don't know how much more I need of that dark color. I don't know how much more I need, what I need to color over and stuff like that. So then I went back with the YG05, and I did all the leaves, and then I'm coloring over them. Why are you doing that? Well, here's the thing. Because I did all the leaves and they had the time to dry before I went in with this layer, you will actually see the outlines of all of the leaves slightly. They will be a little bit darker than the rest. So that is a way for me to know where my leaves are, and I can continue coloring. Now I'm going in with the YG17, and this is where I get the light leaves to look like they're lying on top of the darker bush part, and that is by just outlining the light leaves. It's that simple. When you realize that, you're like, oh, but that's not hard. It's just that you need to think a little bit, and you can do like I did, where you block out everything with your lighter colors, and then you go in with your darker colors on top of that, and then you just outline. Like I'm outlining the flowers, and then I'm outlining the leaves, and it looks like you have kind of colored all the light leaves on top of the dark, even though you're just outlining them. And that was one of the things I really learned from Karen E. Haley. She's super talented. She's so super talented. If you go and subscribe to her channel, kind of go and give her a little shout out and and so because, and say that I sent you, because she's really good at what she does. Her backgrounds are divine, just divine. There are so many different artists out there, especially I had a period of time around 2012, 2013 when I started with Copic coloring, that I followed a lot of artists, especially like manga and fan art artists, just for the reasons that they were the ones who were using the Copics. When I started out, there weren't that many using the Copics. The one that were using the Copics usually didn't use them for stamping and stamp coloring. They were using them for art, or more cartoony art. So I have a whole list in my subscription box where I with a lot of different kind of arts. I have expanded. It's not only Copic art that is in my box. It's a lot of card making. It's a lot of different artists, and everyone is coming back now in January. So from mid-December to like mid-January, my inbox has been kind of quiet, and just in the last couple of days it has just overflown with beautiful art and beautiful cards, and I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed. I don't know really if I have the time to look at everything, but yeah. So I'm doing my last part of the greenery here, kind of just filling in the bottom part with my darkest color, because I felt they were a little bit too stark. So I'm just layering a little bit with the YG17, coloring over those lighter leaves, just giving it a little bit more darkness. That light green is beautiful as the top accent, but I didn't want it to be too much of it, because then it would be then it would overtake the image. That is also a thing that I work with when I work with colors. If I'm using something that is very strong, bright and light, it will be more noticeable than something that is darker and more muted. So there, when I want something to be a little bit less noticed, like this background, I'm adding more of the darkness, I'm adding more of the muted tones, so that the background is still visible, but it's not the kind of main area that you are looking at. And yeah, I don't have a shadow from her onto the bush, because it isn't really needed. And as I have put the kind of light source up in the left corner, it doesn't really show that on the bush that much, but yeah, in the upper left corner, her shadow would kind of fall on the bottom right side, and I thought it would add too much detail to the image, so I just didn't add shadow there. And as you see, I'm going over with the YG05 again over the light leaves, and that is because I'm toning them down. The YG05 is a very, very bright tone, and by adding a couple of layers on top of it, it will be a little bit darker, because you will have a couple of layers of pigment, and kind of just toning it down so that it's not as apparent or something. For the last part, it's only a couple of minutes left now. I'm doing the flowers. I'm doing them exactly the same way as the little flowers that are by her feet. So I'm just adding a little bit of darkness on all of the leaves in the middle. Then I'm blending that out with the 32. So the 35 in the middle, then the 32 that is blended out towards the tips, and then I'm gonna blend out the 32 with the 30, and those are the flowers. So it's very, very simple flowers, very simple leaves, but I feel that the whole background got a whole other technique, a whole other, I don't know, I really liked how it turned out. So yeah, I know you shouldn't toot your own horn, they say, but when I do something that I felt that has been something I've been struggling with, and it finally clicks, then I have a tendency to shout it out to the world and like, look what I did. But I don't know, kind of a 5-year-old in that sense. But yeah, here is the card that I used to finish it. And as I said, if you want to see how I made that card with all the details and everything, that will be linked everywhere. Here are also it linked here. I want to thank you so much for watching. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and just being here. It means a lot to me. Bye.